And what does that have to do with the county?
Because that property, that parking is gonna block or has the potential to make that stuff not happen. So when I asked around it down there yesterday, they said we need to be able to have access to the village DPW. We need to have the fire lane clear to be able to get back to the water source. And we need to be able to let this tractor trailer be able to get in, make a swing and back out, not be blocked so that he can get in and out. So that's the concern from that end, because they're behind the property we own. So it's, I'm just.
I didn't
putting that
know county
information
owned
out there.
property.
That's what I said to her. I didn't know we owned that.
That road, we don't own the road though, right?
It was a tax sale property that didn't sell in the last auction.
The more than 5 acres.
Now, Cassie, didn't your town vote last year not to,
It's actually in the village of Cambridge on the White Creek side, and yes, not right now.
okay, but the race is through, now, is this the one that used to be at the fair that's not at the fair now?
Yeah, same.
Same guy, different.
Same guy, but, no, but the fair isn't having one this year?
No.
It had nothing to do, they never. As far as I know, they weren't. He
So-
went back to the village, because that's where he started in the village, is my understanding.
So, who, Dieter Drake wants the county to do what? If we're
Give
taking
him permission to use the county-owned property parking lot as overflow parking for the bicycle race on May the 10th.
and this is a county-owned property that didn't sell?
Correct.
But we took it back last year when it didn't sell.
2019.
And people turn around,
2019.
is that what you're saying?
So,
Why
yeah, I
this
went
truck?
down and I took pictures in a circle last night, standing there, and then I asked, because I saw the village DPW and that's what they explained. So say our property comes back this far, then there's a line in the village property and the village barns are there. Then through behind that is the water access for the fire department. Next to that, on part of the village property is an agreement for, I think it's J&J, I don't think it's Wild, it's J&J, to bring a track trailer in there, and they have to be able to swing in and back up to get there. That was all the information.
And
I
what's the
had last-
likelihood of them even needing this overflow parking? Is there a likelihood that,
Yeah,
Bob,
It just seems to me, I think that where their overflow park is gonna be out to the front of that, seems to me like it's a huge possibility. Without an attendant there, some darn thing of them filling the whole space up and blocking our fire lanes and all kinds of stuff. I'd be a little reluctant.
well, don't they pay our sheriff department? Make them pay a sheriff to sit there?
I don't know if it's enough sheriff's staff here to
We're-
monitor.
there's- Yeah, we're running quite a lot of overtime right now.
I'd bill it for 'em. I'd make,
I'd like to ask our county attorney his legal opinion. Is it something we should be doing? And if so, how do we do it to protect ourselves?
Well, what happened, how this happened was I got an email from Dieter that was apparently, I got referred to by the highway department. He sent a, basic request for with the county owned property. He asked, what do I have to do with it? He did also provide, I believe, a copy of the $3 million insurance. Since we own the property, I said, well, you'd have to get permission to do it. Initially it was kind of unclear what he wanted it for. I'm like, are you looking to purchase it? Because then there's one thing, or are you just looking to use it, one-time use? He indicated he wanted a one-time use for this overflow parking. So I thought the best way to determine what the county's pleasure was on that was refer to this committee. So can you do it? You probably can. Should you do it? It's a different story.
Well, I want to hear that story because that's what we have to decide, right? Whether to let them do it. Jay,
I'm kind of cold on the idea, just without somebody there parking vehicles, you're gonna block, without fail, there'll be a fire or something, fire trucks won't be able to get in through. Or the milk truck guy will come in there and he'll be frustrated because he can't make his swing and park and
run
they'll
over
just
somebody's.
run over somebody.
That's what they do.
I think there's just a lot of things that could go wrong. more.
Has it not been used in the past?
Not that I know of, but I don't.
And I'm sure they've had bigger crowds than they're gonna have this year. Would be my guess.
Are they gonna use the school for parking?
I don't know what else to do.
I gave you as much information as I was given.
And all I did was go and find out about the property. That was my task.
So do we have a question on, basically presented to us, a question of receiving permission from Dieter Drake for the Batten Toll Break? And do we want to take any action on giving him permission? After hearing all the comments and thoughts. I hear nothing, so I state that the county was not interested in giving permission. Would that be fair enough? Dan? Okay.
There's no motion. to
Laura, love to hear from you on this matter.
So I was not aware of this. Dieter had reached out to us looking for opportunity tax funding to help the market, but we don't put that out. The one thing that I would say is without control on the site, whether we grant permission or not, people could drive onto the site and park whether we've given permission or not.
Right,
So
they could still possibly be there,
They
but
could
if,
still possibly, right.
but if they haven't used it in the past, they probably won't.
We really don't know.
If they haven't
But all it
pushed
takes
it.
is one vehicle and then it's.
Right.
So my suggestion would be that one way or the other, there should be some sort of monitoring of the site, whether it's somebody affiliated with the Batten Kill race or whether we request that they pay somebody. But if we truly want to prevent anybody from parking there, if there's nobody there to monitor it, we have no control over what happens anyway.
Can we post it though? Can't we post no parking and
Possibly.
the deputy driving back? and
That
post it?
would be, but now that creates work for us at the county level.
And we told the first car that would work.
You actually could take some town trucks and park in there so they can. It's not a well-maintained property. I'd be concerned about the bridge. It's pretty rough.
The liability to the county
Yes, sir.
of tires and other things.
Any further actions or comments on this matter?
Should we be doing a no parking fire lane type thing down in there? Should they?
I think we should put some kind of no trespassing or something. We gotta. I'm just concerned about the condition of that property and the ability for somebody to pop a tire or get hurt or step on glass or. Can the fire company do it? Well, you said there's a fire company right there. Could they block it
I
off?
think it's because technically they don't own the property. Technically, we own, from what I could see yesterday, and I checked for the villages, we own the property, the county owns the property, and then they're behind.
Why don't we just have no parking signs?
Right.
Yeah.
You get who, Bob, so I,
That Donahue.
Donahue, okay, so.
I can try.
So, or Dieter should ask for permission, they got poster signs. Is that the will of the board, to have, DPW put up poster signs?
Sounds good.
Okay,
Well, and you might not have realized it was where they get water if there's a fire and all that, so.
okay, and next on our agenda is Snowbill Trail Seeker, Becky Bodkins. How are you?
Fine, how are you, sir?
I see the seeker form.
So, as our trail changes for this year that we know of are three, two in the Greenville area and one in Kingsbury area.
Those are the only changes,
As of right now. yes,
and
sir.
this normally, this is something normal we do every year.
Yes, yes, it's, well, all of them are landowner request.
And now, does any board member have a comment, thought, statement they'd like to make on this? It's all filled out. Dan, have you reviewed it?
I filled it out.
Dan has filled this out, and reviewed it.
He didn't answer. He didn't say it.
I reviewed it as I filled it out.
Yeah,
Checked all the boxes that were in the one year before.
what's, thoughts from the committee?
Move it to the board, is it?
Move it to the full board. I have 2 resolutions drafted already.
Move it to the board.
Motion by Jay, seconded by Sue. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
When we get to the full board, we'll have to do the whole read through at that time.
Now, our next on our agenda is the CDBG housing application in hearing. Nicole? Just a screen,
Go to the hot seat.
come right up.
We don't bite too much.
Now, are you the NRDC?
I am.
Okay.
North Country Rural Development Coalition. I know it's been about 2 years since I first came before your board for your first successful CDBG application. The process takes about, 9 months for application, then we wait, then award. So I'm 12 months into the county's contract for $500,000. It's been a really positive experience overall. Not just working with the county, but working with Laura and her office and being able to have a really flexible funding source to help supplement a lot of the state funding work that we do in Washington County. So North Country Rural Development, formerly Pride of Ticonderoga, has been serving Washington, Warren, and Essex counties for the past 40 years. And this pot of money, why this is a really flexible use of this funding is we can only spend this money within the county borders. And so for a very long time, I know you guys are aware of your housing stock in Washington County. Your housing stock is some of the oldest housing stock in the entire state of New York. So its condition is severely degraded. So in Washington County, my rehabs compared to Warren and Essex County tend to cost anywhere from 15% to 30% more. You guys have a lot of lead and asbestos in your housing stock. A lot of your, constituents are older, meaning that when we go into their homes, in addition to just dealing with health and safety, rehabilitation issues, we also are doing accessibility modifications so that they can age in place in their homes. So ramps, grab bars, expanding doorways. So to that end, when I'm done speaking, I'll pass out our annual report and like a little before and after of one of our first projects that we've done, which was in the town of Whitehall. It was a pretty serious rehabilitation project, and the home was full of lead, it was full of asbestos, a lot of asbestos. We worked really closely actually with your code department. Danielle Drakewine, which is one of your code officers for the county, worked pretty hand in hand with us to save the structure and work with this family. So to that end, even though I'm not done with this contract yet, I have another 9 months to finish it up. We've started our second project. We'll very confident I'll be completed and closed out on time. We need to start thinking about the next funding year. And if the county would like to apply again, my hope is that the county would like to apply again because we have a very long wait list for Washington County. We continue to barely scratch the surface with some of our needier clients. NRDC has lots of other pools of money. We have like emergency repair money, which is $20,000 grants. We do a lot of that work in Washington County. And again, that's spread amongst Essex and Warren. We also have other major rehab money, but again, that's the home program, which has to be equitably split with Essex and Warren. So the CDBG money is just for your county. Other than Laura's, time and sanity and partnership with the county attorney during application and the treasurer's office, it doesn't cost the county any match money or your constituents any money either. It's money that if Washington County does not apply for it, it will be awarded elsewhere in the state. So it's a competitive application with your neighbors. So I would love to field some questions and talk to you all a little bit more, and I'm happy to share a little bit more information on the projects that we currently have in the pipeline.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, how many homes altogether did you rehab between the emergency and CDBG, whatever it must be?
In Washington County this year, we have 8 active projects. So we
Eight.
have 7 that are completed, 1 that's under construction. Since for the past, like, since I have been in this position for the past 4 years, we're probably closer, I want to say, to 50 projects that we've done in Washington County exclusively with the ARPA money that we received from the county. Like just through that, in the past, gosh, we got that, Laura, in September, our first tranche, I want to say in like August, September, we did 15 emergency repairs and like smaller rehabs. We used most of that money. We're about to draw down our second drawdown from Al's office for emergency repairs in the winter. And that was all across. Unfortunately, I think your town was maybe the only town we didn't have her on. We didn't have anybody take advantage of that. And so that was something I was talking with Laura and Al about, is that we see a really huge uptick in requests from Washington County for emergency help in the winter, normally related to like power outages, frozen pipes, heating repairs. With our traditional programs, it takes us normally 30 days to set up an emergency project. So that means 30 days of somebody with like no heat and, mold developing. So that ARPA money was really helpful because we were able to very quickly, income qualify, which we can do in like, an hour or 2 and get a repair person out. So that money is important, and that it prevents these projects from becoming one of these major rehab projects. So like a lot of the clients that I'm working with now are folks who I wish had called us like years ago to just do some of that basic stabilization work. And for whatever reason, we weren't available or they didn't know these services exist. So they like Band-Aid these issues with their home. And then they get kind of on the precipice of they're going to be unhoused, or the home is they're going to move somewhere else. They're going to let the home go into foreclosure, and then you're going to have light. You're going to have one of these tear downs. So the CDBG money is really great for those homeowners that, for whatever reason, found themselves on hard times, but are good taxpayers. So for them to qualify for that program, they have to have homeowners insurance. They have to be current on all their school and property taxes. So like we're helping folks in your community who, are good tax paying residents essentially. So you kind of need multiple programs going at once, because I can do these emergency repairs, but if I don't have the money to do these major rehabs, they're going to be the clock is just ticking for them to become one of those blighted structures, basically.
June,
Nicole, have you had the ability to find local contractors?
I have actually.
Good job.
There's a little bit of begging, some crying. No, it continues to be very difficult. I will say in Washington County, I have a easier time of finding contractors than I do in some of the other areas I work with, where we have a lot of lake homes where, why are they gonna do a $75,000 project when they could do a $4 million lake home? But I will say economically in the past 6 months, some of construction is slowing down. Costs are continuing to go up. Had a lot of contractors for the past 3 years who've said, I'm busy now bidding on our projects, which is I would also like to think that we have a reputation in that we always pay. And that's the thing with like working with nonprofits and these grants, right?
good reputation.
You may have to wait a slightly longer for your check, but you will always get paid and get paid your full amount. Whereas, some homeowners will hire them, pay a deposit, and then they won't make good on it. So, and we have that project that we've been working really diligently on in the town of Salem, one of your disabled vets, which, we are having to use 3 different funding sources to make that project viable, which is why I would like to keep this pipeline of funding open for our residents. So I don't have to do that, because it takes much longer for us to do a full and complete project.
It's amazing between senior citizens and veterans, and we'll listen to Ken Mitchell and the things. This is such an important program for Washington County. And it's worked.
It really is. And then I think the other thing I try to point out to folks, even with the older residents that were helping to, age in place and dignity, stay in their home communities. Eventually, these homes are going to be back on the market in your housing stock. And when you have your families moving in, which is what we all want, we want them to be buying homes that they don't then have to turn around and pump, $50,000-$75,000 themselves. Like, we want to maintain your existing housing stock and when and where we can, which is not work NRDC is doing in Washington County, but we do through the Essex County Land Bank, starting to build new homes as well where we can, so.
Anyone else? Charlie?
I'm trying to recall, if you do a major rehab, does it impact their assessment while they're still living there?
Generally, it doesn't impact their assessment. I've never had an issue with any of our clients, and we have to monitor them for anywhere 5, 10, 15 years. For the next 5, 10, 15 years, I check in with them annually, make sure they're updated on their current, still on their taxes, insurance, mortgage. We come and do an inspection to make sure they're maintaining. I've never had a client bring that up to us. I have on the front end had to appeal some of the valuations with the assessors for people who apply for assistance. For 2 of our programs, we have a home value cap. So if you have a home that's valued at $1 million, you can't come and ask me for new siding, right? Because that's an abuse of the program. But we've had folks that were in homes that were, valued above that cap, but the condition of their homes were deplorable. So then we work with the local assessors to have them actually come out and look at the home and amend the assessment. We've been able to do that 3 times.
And what is the cap?
It changes every single year. But I will say one that I know off the top of my head, for Washington County, it's hovering right around $300,000.
Oh, it's not a low cap.
Approved value only or the?
It's the land and the home. So that's why it's tricky, right? Because you guys have a lot of, right to
Acreage.
farm
Yeah,
communities,
acreage with some of the houses.
huge acreage, teeny tiny home, old farmer wife, retired, and they have their own well and septic on top of that. And so they have massive value, but it's very interesting role that we end up dipping into that I have to be careful, we stay in our own lane. Our goal is to help them stay in their home, but between that and the maintenance of the well and the infrastructure in the home, like it's deceiving the value basically sometimes of these homes that we see. I rarely have folks who get close to that cap, and when I do, it's normally they have a lot of acreage or land. So.
Or location plan, that'll do it too, bring the real estate.
Yeah, if somebody, may be close to the Hudson
Or the
or,
back and kill.
yep.
Or just a pond or lake, it doesn't take much.
And then on top of that, I have to tangle with the DEC on whether it's a wetland or not. I don't know if you guys are having any issues with your seekers right now. But when that family I'm working with in Salem, they're just surrounded by wetlands and we're like, where's these wetlands? But
Everywhere.
they're everywhere. So it's so
So if we do this again, you're expecting like we can do close to 10 homes a year?
I don't wanna say with this tranche of money, we could do 10. If I apply for another 50,000, I feel confident I can do anywhere from like 4 to 5. If we go for the max, which last time we didn't, this is the first time I was working with the county, I went into like really I didn't want to overcommit myself. The max that the county can apply for now is 750,000. I would like to apply for the full amount. With that, I believe I could do anywhere from like 7 to 8 homes. My major rehabs, so like homes with lead, asbestos, or structural issues like this home that we just did in Whitehall, they're ending up being about $100,000. And that's with contractors who are, who are charging me reasonably for the area. If I have other programs that I'm also running in the county, even though it's split 3 ways, that I'm doing like the minor and the emergency repairs, and those are ongoing, and I apply for those every year. But this is my only pot for that, those bigger ones. There is a home that we're actually hoping to work on where the home is so far gone, and these people shouldn't, according to codes, should not even be in there. We're going to demolish it and we're gonna pay for a new home to be placed there. Those projects end up being like 250 to 300,000. And it's, what happens is when we get, we open up the list for the entire county, we have our wait list. I have to go, first come, first serve, so I don't get slapped, legally for not adhering to CDBG's choice limiting action rules. So I may get somebody who I think is going to be one of those rehabs, 100,000, and then we get in the home and then we get codes out. And we go through the environmental testing and we're like, yeah, we can't save this home. So either I cancel their project and they get no help, or we pull more money to help that one family. So I don't know ahead of application if I may get one of those in there, but there's a chance because you guys have a lot of them in Washington County. You have a lot of really interesting converted gas stations. And when the state gets involved with those, you're laughing at me, and yet before I lived here and worked really heavily in the county, I would have never thought I found 7 in the past 4 years in Washington County. And the state just, buried tanks. I have to decommission them, and half of the time they're like, these people shouldn't even be living here, but they own this. This is their home. We're gonna save it. And so that's just a little peek kind of into the administration of that, which is why I appreciate your partnership, because you guys believe and trust in us enough to do this work. And then on the back end, we're trying really hard to advocate for your constituents and make sure that we can help them when and where we
It's
can.
interesting you mentioned gas stations, because originally in the countryside, there were a lot of farms. They actually became a gas station just so they had fuel
Yeah,
out in the countryside. So I bet there's 3 or 4 just on a 4-mile area from my place, and I can point to where they actually sold gas.
Yeah.
That you never would expect there was a gas station there and ever.
which was an economic need and,
Right.
is amazing. And like, it's from economic development perspective, when I work in the downtowns, I want them to have multiple streams of income so that when in the slow season, or you have, a bad farming season, you have another source of income, right? And now, environmentally, the tides have turned so much, and economically, that's not viable, but they're still left with that infrastructure and no way to decommission them in a way that, because if we don't work with them to do that, and something were to happen, if there were to be a leak, they have to foot the bill, and that's the last thing that you want for them either. So,
Put all the mom and pop stores out of business, is what it really
and
did.
small farms,
So
which is.
Dan, what do you need from us?
Motion for what?
To apply for the,
Oh,
for
that's
the
what you're at.
maximum is what you want.
Laura,
Yeah,
Yes, I believe we need 2 things. We need a motion to apply. We can't apply until we hold a public hearing. So we need to schedule a public hearing to apply for a CDBG grant.
so is that the motion you're moving? And Sue seconded it. Any further discussion?
You mentioned to set the cap. Are there income cap? What are the household income caps?
So it's 80% AMI, and it is, I don't wanna say it's like a voodoo table, but it is a very personal specific table cap. It looks at your household size, it looks at all of your income that you're getting, so not just, your personal income, your assets, social security, and so I can send you a copy of what HUD's AMI guidelines are, but, I do not like to make it public because it deters people from applying, and 9 times out of 10, when people apply, they find out that they actually are qualified when we sit down with them and we do their income qualifications. So I don't know off the top of my head, what the new 2020-25 HUD guidelines are, but I can certainly, give you a broad brushstroke if you would like that.
so basically, though, if somebody was on strictly social security, they're more than likely gonna qualify.
Most of your new county workers, your, teachers in their first 5 years, your new, LPNs, newly graduated RNs, so like a good tranche of the workforce will qualify, with a family of 2 or 4. Definitely, I rarely have folks over 60 who apply who don't qualify. They sometimes have some really good assets in retirement, but I've had 1 in 4 years, like somebody over 60 applying for an advocacy funding. So, but if you go on our website, we do have some of that information up, and you can just easily Google, HUD income guidelines 2025 for Washington County, and they'll pop up. But they are misleading because there's a lot of things that you don't take into consideration when you do those income qualifications.
I have a little personal experience with a home that got rehabbed. And I didn't ask any questions, so I'm gonna ask you the question. Let's say you're in poor health and you can't work and you're on
Social Security.
Social Security, and you get qualified for a grant, you get a new furnace, fix the roof, all these different things. And in 2 years' time, you say, geez, I don't want to live here anymore, or I can't live here anymore. Do they get to sell their home
Yes, they
and
do.
keep all the profit from it?
Not necessarily. So if they sell their home to somebody who is a similar circumstances as them, who is gonna be their primary residence, they're not gonna turn it into short-term rental.
Right.
And let's say your period of affordability, so that's the security instrument that the state uses so that you don't take the money and flip it. It can be like anywhere from 2, 3, 10 years. It depends on how much money you get. So let's say it was for 5 years. You would only owe the state back up for 3%, 3 years when you sell that home.
Let's say you got $20,000 and you got it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, no longer can live there. Does that, if he sells it to a total stranger,
Mhm.
and he's going, let's say, into a nursing home,
Mhm.
with his income, he qualifies for nursing home. That is all his money, is all I'm saying. He doesn't have to pay that back.
He does
after
not,
2
he would not have to pay that money back in those circumstances, no,
Okay.
especially if they're going into nursing home. If it were a young family who decided they wanted to move and they were gonna sell it to somebody who was gonna turn it into short-term rental, they would have to pay back a portion, but they would not pay that, they would not cut a personal check. It would come out of the closing statement and it would go back to the state of New York, into the Housing Trust Fund, and it goes back into these grants that we're
That's like an
getting.
automatic from being hooked to the deed.
Yes, so. and
But you're using the worst case scenario.
I'm using,
Let's say,
Yeah.
if you use it, take a younger couple with 2 kids and they outgrow the place,
Mhm.
and they've only been there 2 years and they receive 20 or 30,000. And they sell it to another young couple with only 1 child.
then we would talk with that other young couple to say, hey, are you, we won't call back any of this money so long as you can agree that this is gonna be your primary residence and you're not gonna rent it out.
Okay.
The reason that the state put these security instruments in place is because over and over again, for a number of years, they've folks sign up and not have life circumstances, but sign up and use the money and flip the house.
Yeah.
And we don't want that happening. Obviously, issues happen in life, and the state as well as our office, works really hard to educate them on the front end, the back end, and then all those times that we check in with them throughout those years. And we talk to our clients every year and say, thank you for your updated taxes and insurance and mortgage. Are you planning on staying in the home if you ever decide to move before, 2027, 2028, let us know so we can work with you to make sure you understand, as well as your closing agents. What happens when their period of affordability is over, they get a lien discharge from us signed by New York State so that the lien is no longer on the home. They've lived there long enough, and if they did at that point choose to sell it, and it became a short-term rental, there's nothing we could do
Oh,
5, 10
absolutely.
years down the road.
So there's a lien that goes on everyone for a certain number of years.
Yep. But as long
And
as
that
they-
prohibits some people from doing it.
it does,
Right.
and you can sometimes tell, and I've had a few of them over the years. And we'll get all the way through the application process and we'll talk about the security instrument and the, you know, the regulations attached to that, and they'll kindly at that point say no, which, you know, then it's doing its job, which is a good thing, because we want that money going to folks who are gonna live full-time in your communities and be taxpayers and who actually need this assistance versus others who don't, and normally house flippers don't need that assistance. And there are actually other programs out there now for folks who are small developers who want to fix up homes and put them on the market affordably. So we can point them in that direction as well.
So did we need another resolution, or you said two, but we did the one for the
Still gotta
Anderson?
vote.
Public hearing and motion to apply.
We still got a vote.
Right, we haven't voted on it?
No,
No,
no, that was about half hour.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Any other
I'm sorry.
resolutions that we have to deal with on this matter? And you said you wanted to hand out an annual report.
I have an annual report, there, each of you, I'm just, if you could pass it down to your colleague. And I don't know if I brought enough for everyone at the table, but if not, I can leave the other ones that I brought with me here. These are also online and my contact information is in here. In addition to this, we you know, we did a number of other new projects in Washington County. We got an award for $2 million for the vacant rental program. And we did make 2 awards.
Do you have any more?
I have a whole folder. I just don't have any of the before and after pictures in that folder.
Before.
So, and we made an award for 2 new rental units in Whitehall, and then there's 3 new rental units in Greenville going in. So that, we're very excited to do that. award.
Now is Pride, I can't remember on now today, just a name change.
It's just a name change. Organization is totally the same. We have a lot of pride groups around and they don't do housing, so we wanted to make
So
sure.
Pride of Tycon Road.
It does, it just
It
has a
did.
different name. I'm.
Well, yeah, well, I don't tell me the new name.
Okay, no.
Just wanted to how to look for it.
That is probably backwards. That's our land bank house that we did. I'll just show you a picture of it.
Before and after.
Speaking of, here we go. This is more of the land bank work that we ended up doing. So that was a home that was donated to us by Essex County into the land bank. It was on their tax foreclosure auction for 5 years.
And we can't do that anymore.
You can, if you have the home valued as is and you determine what the proceeds would be with Tyler versus.
Do that? That's something new.
Yeah, it's always been,
You can do that?
yeah, you wanna get into buying a house?
You have to pay that though.
Fair market.
You do have to pay
You have
it
to have it
back
appraised.
after, yeah, we've been having them appraised, obviously before we fix them up when we take possession. So for that home,
No, he's asking for a different reason.
oh, he's asking for a
Right,
different reason.
but that's
Oh.
okay. I still think the answer.
There's a process, you have to have it appraised, and then you're gonna pay that appraisal amount.
You have to pay the appraisal amount to get it out of the tax sale.
We, as a private developer, yes, if you are a land bank, which a land bank is a public authority attached to the county. So
Right.
there's the State Land Bank Act, so it's a little more flexible for us. But how we do it in Essex County is we look at these, we have the blighted properties appraised when we take them. We use grants to rehab them and sell them. And so whatever they sell for, we have a formula where we subtract what the proceeds would be. We hold that in escrow for 5 years. And so these folks who had the home taken from them for non-payment of taxes have 5 years to claim that if they want to. Now, for that home in particular, the proceeds were like $7,000 because of the value of the home, the back taxes, the administration, and the initial site cleanup that the county had to put in.
Which come at a cost.
Yeah, so, But that's a very separate conversation. And if you guys ever want to get into land banking, I'm happy to talk with you about
Well, it's
that.
funny because we've seen some of that stuff in NISAC and that's an interesting way of.
The new legislation hurt land bank significantly.
Right, and that's what our meeting was on that time.
So what we've been doing in Essex County is working with individual property owners who know that they're going into foreclosure or know that they've been having issues. Lots of folks who buy these thinking they're gonna have money to fix them up and they're just a zombie property and they get behind on taxes. So not folks who, like, we would be unhousing to take, which is ethically wrong, so we wouldn't do it. Working with them to privately donate the property to the land bank, and then the land bank pays their back taxes. So we avoid the whole home going into foreclosure and then demolishing it.
That preemptive strike before the foreclosure. is
But you would
much-
need a
Much
a
wider.
land bank for that to happen.
Yes, sir.
So we're using the state's land bank money to pay those back taxes,
So-
which is there's a eligible expense called acquisition. So it can, it could be to actually go on the market and buy property if you wanted, but we're using it to remediate blight. So that's the second, besides creating workforce housing, remediating blight is the other, mandate for land banks. And so, it's unfortunate, Tyler versus Hennepin, but it's not unworkable with a really blighted property. But it's piecemeal, so you have to really,
Just more work to get to it.
it's more work to get to it, yeah,
But not impossible.
not impossible. So,
And how about mobile homes? Do you still replace those?
yep, we have, goodness gracious, we are doing, that's through NRDC, not the land bank. And we have one in Hudson Falls, we have two in Greenwich, one in Whitehall, not one in Salem, one in Granville, and we have three in Putnam. We have right now almost $4 million in mobile home replacement money, so we're doing a lot of work. The reason why all of those are coming online kind of at once is because of that rule that I mentioned with the DEC. I don't know if you know that in January of this year, they changed the wetland regulations so that the DEC has to rule on every single project, and they have 90 days to make that ruling. They used to have 30 days. So now I can be fully ready to go, have a contractor waiting, and I have to now wait 3 months before I can touch these projects. And it's unfortunate because we're talking not about like, I would think traditional wetlands. If tiny little things popping up on these maps, these homeowners literally telling us like, we have no wetlands near us, but on the map, it shows us the DECs to come out, do a wetland delineation.
No job.
It holds us up, but it's not, it is what it is, and we're still gonna replace the homes. It just means they're all happening at once.
So do you have a waiting list or is that easy to get on?
Our mobile home replacement waiting list is much shorter than our rehab waiting list. So that one's probably, we're talking like a 6 to 9 month waiting list. When their projects sometimes will take 12 months to actually complete because of that rule. We also, because we have nowhere to put these people when we demolish their homes. Right? Because you guys don't have many hotels in Washington County or, yeah, right? So we, instead of demolishing the home and placing it exactly where it is, we place the home next to it. So that they can move their things from their existing home into the new home and not be displaced. But that is a lot more work for us. And so they take a little bit longer, but that's the only way to make these.
Some of that's better.
It's better for the homeowner in the end. So that's my whole caveat with that wait list. Rehab money is a lot harder to get your arms around than mobile home replacement money right now with the state. So,
Did you say that 4 million?
and 4 million, yeah, across three counties for mobile home replacement. So, we just got another 1.5 million from the home program for last year. For our 3 counties, plus another 500,000 from MHRP. And then we have over $2 million with HC, which we also leverage for mobile home replacement. And then our other contract, that was only 12 months in, we have another 1.5. So the home program is something that NRDC applies for every single year so that there's no gap in funding. For CDBG, we're doing it every 2 years, so we're not
There's a
double,
waiting list no matter what.
it's probably always gonna be.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have any concerns about the current federal financial picture?
so for your grant and all the work that I currently have right now, I've already gotten my release of funds from the federal government. So the way that these programs work is once you get an award and a release of funds, they actually physically transfer that money to HCR. It's not being held by HUD. So with a lot of these other programs that, when there was funding holds or cancellations, those like through USDA and elsewhere, the federal agency held that money, and then the entity or the state or the county drew it down and didn't get fully transferred. So there is a possibility that if we get this award next year, and in between, July when I apply and December when we get the award letter, they could cancel and we wouldn't get it. But there wouldn't be an instance where they would be canceling the contract when I had already started work. So once I actually physically take a hammer to any of these buildings, they have transferred that money to the state, and it would be phenomenally unprecedented. for
That's
them.
more what I was curious about,
Yeah.
your future outlook years, how you think if they could drastically change your program.
So we have pretty much 75-25 funding. So 75% of our funding is from the state of New York, 25% is from the federal government. So for, we don't make our bread and butter for our agency on our federal programs. We also have a large capital reserve for the past 40 years of the work that we've been doing. I feel pretty confident of our outlook, but until I'm told differently, we're gonna continue to operate the way we have. And maybe that means we apply for more state money that I haven't applied for before, if things change over the next 4 years.
And housing's still a top issue.
And housing's still a top issue. I mean, even the president made it clear that he had a housing plan and, that they were committed to addressing this. And I look forward to whatever that looks like with their, with his new department and his new secretary of HUD. I know that our state, has continued to make this a top priority, and our state agencies, HCR is very apolitical and continues to do their work. It's not between, if our governor were to change in the upcoming election, HCR is not going to change drastically. So I feel very good about these programs. And again, they're funded mostly through the Housing Trust Fund Corporation, which is, they're taking those return funds and reinvesting them. And every year when they make those awards, they look at the income they've made with Housing Trust Fund Corporation. That's how they determine how much each state program is going to get. And then there's also line items through both houses. So I don't see any of these programs that have been around for 40 years disappearing overnight. I think we're going to have a long runway. But I know that's a very fortunate position to be in, because not every nonprofit or agency is in the same boat as I am in. Not on wood. So.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Anyone else have any questions before we move on? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Laura, are you ready? Want to follow the agenda? Is that working?
Yep, fine.
Okay,
So the first thing is short-term rental registration. As you know, as we've been talking, changes at the state level requiring each county to set up their own short-term rental registry. Melissa, Al, and I interviewed several different software company offerings that had the potential to offer what the state is requiring and what we require. We found one fairly clear contender that we felt was significantly better than any of the others. Their software, it's called Decker Software, is also on state contract. So the cost to us is going to be $18,500. So I'm proposing that we purchase this software and take the money out of the Tourism Occupancy Tax Reserve Fund. I haven't seen the final 2024 numbers yet, but we had 367,000. I think it's about 400 right now.
It's the one thing that's doing good.
Well, I've been banking.
You have
that-
18,000.
No, I have it, there's definitely 18,000 in there, yeah. So, I mean, one of our concerns is this particular software company is also one that's being recommended by NISAC. We have 62 counties that are trying to implement this registry at the same time. You know, we would like to get moving on it as soon as possible. As of right now, the way the state ruling works, as of March 1st, all short-term rental hosts were required to start collecting sales tax. When a county has its registry operating, if it has an effective enabled occupancy tax law, that county can start collecting occupancy tax at any time. So that would technically mean that if we purchased the Decker software and got it up and running, we could start collecting occupancy tax immediately. The deadline to either opt out or begin collecting taxes is by November of this year. So we are thinking that if we purchase the software now and get it up and running, you know, by this fall sometime presumably, one of the last things that we would have to do is cancel the agreement that we currently have, the voluntary agreement with Airbnb, because then it would all run through this platform.
And there's also an update. So this is available through Sourcewell
Right.
now. So we had an update. So the CIO did talk to them this morning and they're available through SHI at a price of $18,030. Okay, we'll take it.
And now we have a motion on the floor, so I gotta get a second before we move.
I'm gonna second it.
Okay, Jay seconds. Now discussion, Jay.
Is it a one-time payment or do we have a maintenance? on it?
Annual cost.
Annual. will be
Every year is
18,500.
18,000?
Okay.
Wow.
For once in my life, I'm gonna make you feel better. So the reserve money for occupancy tax that we've already collected are gonna pay the initial 18,000.
Yeah,
There's going to be a $250 registration fee for each of the property owners. Those fees will pay all future year costs. There'll be no taxpayer dollars used.
the 250 is every year or just one time?
There's an annual renewal if you're, if you're an owner. There's an annual registration fee that the county will charge you to participate in the registry. And you can't participate in the online platforms anymore without a registration number, so.
And the 250, I think, was just a number we could
It's
go
a-
around.
Yeah, that's my random,
The-
that's
yeah,
the
The
number.
legislation allows us to charge a fee, but the fee can only be reasonably based on what our costs are. So for example, we can't use that registration fee as an income generating platform. It has to be tied back to what the software is costing us, what the administration of the program is costing us. I think our estimate is that it will probably.
Our
be
estimate is
somewhere
that
around
250 will kind of cover the platform, my time, Laura's time. We've kind of figured, again, that's a rough number. But we won't be levying money to pay for that.
And the registration is good for 2 years.
Alright.
Part of the
Oh,
short-term rental.
so you won't get 250 only the first time?
Every-
Then 2
every
years?
Every year, every other year.
No, every other year, if it's a 2-year registration.
The
fee.
registration, the way that the legislation works right now are good for a 2-year renewal, which means that we have to factor in that 2-year cost versus a annual platform cost. We'll have to just factor that into the registration fee.
Dave, you had
I
a
think that's-
question?
We'll be back into, there's a.
Yeah, could be.
Somebody doesn't register.
They
If
don't have
they don't register,
registration.
they can't appear on the platform, but they can still rent their house, and if we find out there is
Enforcement mechanism.
enforcement, we can.
What is it for?
So there's a process that, if I remember, I don't know if there was legislation or. the
So yes, that's the next thing on the list is that we,
notice and
our
process.
Our attorney has been diligently working on comparing the language in chapter amendment and the law to make sure that our definitions of short-term rental, enabling the platforms to collect property tax or occupancy tax, because right now our legislation only allows the treasurer to collect that tax. So Dan has provided a draft. I think we're pretty close to getting that finalized. That what we will need to do is amend our local law. So
And we need a public hearing for that.
And we will need a public hearing for that as
And are we
well.
ready to move that today?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
We'd be willing to set.
So we need to vote on this one first and then go to that.
What
Okay.
that enforcement?
We're still on discussion.
It's in, I'm sorry, so it's in the legislation, there's very specific amount. So the inspections of a short-term rental, there's a self-certifying process. But if somebody complains against an owner, there's a code enforcement thing, or somebody rents a property that's trying to avoid the occupancy and sales tax. There's a very specific penalty against both the short-term rental platforms. They actually get a substantial penalty for allowing registrants to book a residence on the platform if they don't have a valid registration number. And then there's another penalty that would actually go to the short-term rental operators for violation of any part of the law.
Just
And
so
that's
that-
that's short-term rental law. the
Set in
fee.
the statute.
Just so I
It's
understand what
set in
you're
the
saying, you're saying that I couldn't use Airbnb unless I had a registration.
That's
number.
correct.
Okay, and what's the other one, Verbo?
Verbo.
This wouldn't
Any
participate?
online,
They're all on it now?
That means Tenter, that means any online. So I will tell you, I mean, we had an interesting question. One of our larger camps up in Fort Anne, who are a 501c3 nonprofit. It occurred to me, so if a sales tax exemption certificate applies to sales tax, would it apply to occupancy tax? Because New York City nonprofit short-term rentals pay occupancy tax. So I reached out to NISAC and they said, we don't know, we're gonna have to ask tax and finance. So, there's still a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered as we go forward.
Traditionally, it still applies. So
Yeah, I mean-
even like if we go to training, we might be exempt from sales tax, but we're still paying occupancy tax.
Right.
Even as a county.
Yeah. Try to answer your question. The treasurer is authorized to bring a proceeding in Supreme Court. We also have the ability to notify the Attorney General and let them bring a proceeding. Additionally, there can be, if they're found in violation, they could be banned from being able to register and therefore unable to do anything for up to a year, among other things.
The fine was very small, if I remember right.
Yeah, the fine's small, but can each
Escalate.
subsequent violation.
Yeah.
can
Fine to the host is small, the fine to the platforms if they violate is significantly larger.
What does this do to a motel where you wanna book a room for a week? Cause a lot of them have efficiency cabins.
They're still subject.
Anything
It's only
under-
30 days
under
and
30
longer,
days.
it is not. Anything
So
under
how
30
about
days.
then, here's the next
Motel is a
one.
motel, so. it'll be
The
different.
town of Easton, Christ the King, has all these efficiency cabins that they rent out. Has nothing to do with the church.
I heard they don't do that anymore.
It's news to me. Cause they're sitting
Then
there.
they
and I
would
thought
fall
they're-
under the same
they let us
nonprofit,
swing.
but presumably they're a 501c3.
Okay, anyone else for a question? Charlie,
You mentioned we have to have a law in place to be able to collect. What if the town already put a law in place ahead of you? Where's your standing?
As I understand it, if I recall the law correctly, the chapter amendments. Any municipality can put a law in place until the county does. Once the county does, and I think once that November 1st date pass, localities can no longer have their own registry, they have to use the county registry.
And let's be clear, we already have a law in place. We're
Yeah, we
amending
do, we're just amending what we have in place.
There's actually only one locality that already has their own short-term rental registry in place, and that's the town of Fort Anne. That will remain because but no, as to Dan's point, no other towns will be allowed to create their own registry. But Fort Anne can keep theirs because it's grandfathered.
And there may towns put a surtax above the tax that the county levies.
It's possible. It's possible that folks could end up with two charges. That's another one of those unresolved questions.
any further discussion on this matter? Sue,
As far as the registration fee, does Fort Anne have their own registration fee? So
Yes.
it could be Fort Anne
Both.
registry
Could be.
It could be on top of it, yeah, or
So what would that annual amount be? Do you know what?
what Fort Ann is doing, I don't
It's
know.
300 or 350, there's.
Forty-ins,
I think it's 350, yeah.
So that would be a combination per year.
And that was one of our
600.
questions. We didn't know if it would be, would that person pay both?
Yes,
Yes,
Right? Or would Fort Ann, depending on what their platform is, share that information with the county? That was one of our questions. We hadn't talked about that yet. So that person's not paying.
they need our registration number to play in the platform.
No, they can issue their own registration number and then give us their registration number.
So,
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
There's one.
So we have a motion on the floor by Brian. I'm not sure what it is anymore, and
I think first one is simply to purchase the software and move that to finance. Then the second one is going to be to set the public hearing.
so we understand what we're voting on. All in favor, say,
But
wait.
just one more question. Can I ask the committee to give Laura permission to pull the trigger on the purchase now while it's being sent to finance? The sooner we get on the.
We have the
Yeah.
authority to do that.
I don't
Yeah,
know if
just
we have
make
the
it, you just make
authority.
permission, not pro tunc at the board meeting to today's date.
I'm asking if that's possible, because as soon as she can pull that trigger, because again, there's gonna be.
You're trying to get ahead of
trying to
60.
get-
One other counties.
Yeah. What's your opinion, Dan?
My opinion is I read the resolution saying permission is non pro tunc to today's date.
I would appreciate that.
So with that being said, is you amending your motion to take in that consideration?
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Next resolution. is
Okay.
to say what?
Set the public hearing.
Move it, second.
Set the public hearing for what, next board meeting?
Yep.
Okay, so we got the date. Do we got a second on that, Jay?
Yep.
Discussion on that matter? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Now,
Almost done. Right?
what you, hanging in there.
I have a couple of quick budget amendments. This is grant funding carryover that did not get rolled over from 2024 year into 2025 year. One of them was on the agenda was the CDBG housing, because we'd like to get an invoice to NRDC paid. That you took care of at Friday's board meeting, but there are 3 others. The first one is we have a technical assistance ARPA grant to the Lake Champlain, Lake George Regional Planning Board. That is account number 4625.2348. We have $25,000 that did not get drawn on by the Regional Planning Board because they still have the first 25,000 that they hadn't spent down yet. Because they have been having not as much interest in taking out funding from this program. And because we've got a timeline to spend this, I'm suggesting that we move the money into the Regional Planning Board's 2025 budget. And then if it looks like it can't be spent, we will have to look at an alternate use because that's ARPA funding. But we need to move it into this
But
year's
if we
budget.
spend it to the planning board, it is spent, right? Am I right on that?
We're not sure that we can be able to make that argument, so.
Okay.
Let's not take the risk.
Move it to finance.
Move it.
Moved by Jay, seconded by Brian, I'm assuming. Any discussion on this? Recommendation by Laura, Al? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the next one is the countywide infrastructure resiliency grant. That grant only really got started at the end of last year. There's only a small amount of money. Regional Planning Board is also administering that grant. So we have $197,750 to move into this year's budget.
How much was it to begin with?
200.
200, yeah, just small amount.
It's just a
Move
little
it.
bit. Yeah.
Motion by Jay, seconded by, well, we had 2 seconds. Brian, he's the closest. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, carried. Just the CDBG housing grant,
You did that one on Friday.
how much was carried or moved forward? I forgot that
That
number.
was about 400,000.
So 100,000 has been spent and we're moving, so we're really getting ahead here, aren't we? Or
Well, in
kicking this
actual
out a long
fact,
way.
the rest of that 400,000, Nicole will be submitting invoices within the next couple of months that will fairly quickly spend that down.
Okay,
So the final one to move is the ARPA Tourism Fund. That one is $335,352. That's the remainder of the ARPA Tourism Fund, which we expect to have probably about 200,000 of that spent this year, and then the rest of it will roll over and finalize in 2026, and then we will be done with the ARPA Tourism Fund.
and when's that money being spent for?
It's also Black Dog, where a lot of the
Okay.
250th programming
Yeah,
is coming out
okay,
of that.
yes, I
budget.
recall that.
It's extra tourism stuff, basically.
Move it.
Second.
That's it.
Motion made and seconded, discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Does that conclude?
Mhm.
And now we don't have Sam here, so what do we do from here out?
There's no more interviews today.
No more interviews today? Oh, I thought we had more.
Evaluation.
Oh, you're looking at me? I'm
Yeah,
next
I,
month.
well, normally, we had the interview.
I was like, wait.
Mitch,
It's on for sometime next month, I believe.
Next month.
I think everybody's had enough.
I think so.
I'm Scott.
I'm not making it.
No, good. Sorry, Laura, I didn't hear you.
Ag planning, date to be determined.
That's it, as in never.
Oh, I know.
So